thanks, Bill. No pressure on that expectation. I see, and Ken was nodding, so it must be real. So, again, welcome. Hopefully you're enjoying the day. Welcome to Santa Clara. Welcome to Huawei R&D. We're glad to have you. We love showing off our facilities and our people. The only thing we'll apologize for, if you can detect the engineers in the crowd by the people who feel very uncomfortable with these things around their neck and the fancy dress. We normally are a tie-free zone if we can help it, but we made an exception for today. Again, my name is John Roese. I'm the Senior Vice President and General Manager of the North American R&D Centers. We actually have 7 across the United States. Currently, we employ just shy of 1,000 technical experts around the country. The numbers change every day, and it is a tremendous growth rate, very equivalent to Huawei. Huawei has grand aspirations and is trying to be and is demonstrating leadership in many, many segments, and part of that is technological expertise. And one of the things that we believe is the center of the technical universe is in fact Silicon Valley. So our decision to move from our headquarters in Plano to make our headquarters for R&D in Silicon Valley was more than just a real estate transaction. It was clearly a statement that this is where the action is, and even though we have resources across the country and across the world, we believe that to be a successful leader in the technology industry, you have to be here. So I wanted to share with you today, in my short time, I'm usually a little bit of a longer speaker, so I'll try to be quick. A couple of things. One, I wanted to give you some vision and view on the ICT world as it's materializing, because those are new terms to many people. Then I wanted to talk a bit about what we do in Huawei North American R&D, and it's a pretty interesting story. And then a little bit about our capabilities, and then we'll wrap up. And hopefully you'll have a better appreciation of what goes on in the facilities you were in and what all these brilliant people are working on, and most importantly, where we're heading as an industry that will take advantage of these technologies and expertise. So to start with, there is this new term called ICT. The correct terminology is information and communication technology. It is something new as opposed to just simply an evolution of what we had in the past. The newness is the fact that in the past our industry, the technology industry at large, was focused on primarily what we would call enterprise or IT technology, sold by enterprise technology companies to enterprises, the stuff you did at work. The second pillar was web and consumer. When the web materialized, a whole host of companies materialized, Google, Facebook, et cetera, Yahoo in the past, et cetera, and they sold their services primarily to consumers. Some of the carriers participated in that also. And then thirdly, there was this concept of telecom or carrier, which was sold to a wide range of people, but it was really the facilities that enabled the internet. And these industries were largely segmented. In fact, you could build a solution and be a company that purely focused on the telecom industry, and as long as we built fantastic wireless infrastructure and delivered it on time, on budget, at great economics, our customers were happy and the world moved forward. The problem is we are now entering an era where the walls are coming down. Fundamentally, we can't tell the difference anymore between a classic enterprise technology and solution versus a classic carrier technology and solution, or even a consumer one. And to visualize this, because you may be asking, well, maybe there isn't this distinction, I wanted to give you 3 examples of real ICT experiences that you probably experience right now that are a portend of things to come. That more and more our industry will focus on these kind of solutions and problems to solve versus just building a widget for a particular market. The first example is, who in this room has an iPad or an iPhone or some kind of Apple device? Yeah, okay, just a few people. Okay, keep your hands up. Who in this room uses that over the mobile network, the cellular network? Yeah, of course you do, you know. And who in this room does business functions on it? Funny, guess what? You're all official members of the ICT world. The reason you are is because you are actually using things from all 3 of those domains in a common way to create an experience that was difficult to do before. That iPad or iPhone or smartphone or whatever you're using is a consumer technology in its origin. That's where it came from. It came from consumer companies, and in the past it would just be a consumer toy. It wouldn't have been a business tool. The infrastructure you're running on is definitely telecom. And it is very important that you realize that it comes from a huge investment in capital expenditure to make that possible. And lastly, the applications that you're running on it, the business services, are classic enterprise. And when you put them all together, what you've experienced is something called ICT. And I think you'll agree, it's actually quite useful. Because if you roll back in time, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you had to go to work to use the cool technology. When you went home, it was difficult to do your job. When you were on vacation, maybe this is a good thing, you couldn't do work. But the world's changing. And with it is huge productivity because of this ICT transformation. The second example, this is maybe a bit of a newer one that hasn't gone mainstream, and maybe you don't want this one, but you'll probably experience it. In China, we have a group called UCD that goes out and looks at user experience. They did a survey of consumers, and they asked them, what is the #1 feature you want from the next generation of network delivered to the consumer? And they were primarily targeting affluent Chinese families. And the #1 request was video conferencing, video collaboration amongst the family. It's not unusual to see that type of requirement. But what's happening is we are starting to see experiences in which video is popping up in interesting places. In fact, there are new solutions that Huawei is starting to deliver that allow you to do things like telepresence, high-definition video conferencing in your house, but connected to the telepresence systems in your business. Well, again, it's an example of an ICT experience. Telepresence is a classic enterprise technology. That's where it started, that's where it exists. It used to be cost prohibitive anywhere else. Obviously, doing it from your home kind of reminds you of being a consumer. And you need a high-capacity, robust network infrastructure across the cloud for you to actually accomplish that task. All three in play at the same time. And the last example is this idea of 3 years ago, when you talked, or when I talked, as the former CTO of Nortel, and going in and having my chats with some of the large North American operators, like you can name the list, and I talked to them about companies like Skype or Google. Those were the enemy, and they're still kind of the enemy, but the world's changing. And so what you're seeing now is when you get a cell phone from many of the operators around the world, there might be an application on it called Skype. And while it does provide voice services that competes with the voice services that the carrier offers, they've found ways to link them together to make an intelligent decision that if you're calling internationally and the carrier can make no money, use Skype. If you're calling locally and you can use the voice minutes, use the voice minutes. And we've started to see this cooperation between over-the-top players and traditional carriers and the consumer to create a more ubiquitous experience. Again, all three components in play at the same time for the same experience that actually has incredibly high value. And if you haven't experienced this, go to some really distant country. You'll be very thankful you have potentially access to an over-the-top voice service if the carrier can't provide that service to you. But if you're driving down 101 in California and the carrier's got great coverage and it works wonderful, you use their network. The reality of it is that pulling these things together in an integrated solution is the essence of ICT, but it's also what this industry is going to look like. It will not be sufficient for companies to purely be one of these buckets and not understand the others because they won't be able to deliver the solutions that matter. So, shifting gears, what do we do here? North American R&D is an expert-level applied technology organization. We are not a research organization. We do some research, but our principal mission, as is the principal mission of Huawei, is the commercialization of advanced technology to solve customer problems now and in the future. And the reality is our structure is set up to attract the best and brightest people. To give you some demographics, like I said, we're approaching somewhere between 800 and 1,000 technical people. It changes every day as we hire more people. The facilities you were in today have about 400 and something people. That third building with the other logo on it, we're about to occupy in about 2 months. It's already full, okay? We have people doubled up in cubes because we are growing so fast, which is a problem, but a good problem. The reality is, in that organization, the average seniority of the team is probably 20, 25 years in the industry. They are industry veterans, experts that have done this before. Their mission is to look at the next generation of problems and find a way to solve that problem without repeating the mistakes of the past. Our mission is to give them a platform that they can do it with almost infinite resources, the support of one of the biggest telecommunication companies in the world, Huawei, and a very strong culture of encouraging them to take risk and to basically solve problems in novel and interesting ways. That is the essence of being a leader. If you look at this ICT ecosystem, though, in this rather busy chart, this actually defines everything that we do in North America. We are not a site that just builds wireless or wireline. Our job is to focus on all the technology across the spectrum and make sure that Huawei can successfully navigate the ICT world. So we have many examples of individual technology that we're leading. We are developing the latest and greatest wireline access technology, gigabit and multi-gigabit speed, multi-hundreds of gigabit speed, wireline access to the home and to the business. We are developing technologies around customer relationship management, total other end of the spectrum, software, to make sure that the carriers and the industry can manage the customer base and understand their behavior and actually provide services to them. If you didn't see in some of the demos, we are working very heavily on media and video programs. I think we have a dozen different video and media programs, everything from dynamic transcoding to content delivery networks that are highly optimized for media, to even some really advanced technologies like telepresence that also has augmented and virtual reality inside of it, which is kind of interesting. Imagine talking to an avatar in a telepresence system that represents somebody who's on a mobile device on the other side of the world. As long as you can communicate, it's a good system. We are working on ways for the carrier to monetize their assets around information, around location and context in the advertising market. It may not be that important to you if you're a consumer, but it's very important to the rest of the world to be able to use things like hyperlocal targeting and advertising networks so that we can actually provide a service that extracts value out of the network beyond just moving bits around. We are now beginning a very large ramp to tackle the enterprise space. And one of the key components of that is a transformation of the voice world from just simply having a phone and an email inbox and instant messaging and video conferencing to establishing something called unified communications. This idea that you as an individual have multiple modes and methods in which you communicate, and a system makes the right decision about which one you should use and allows you to use them concurrently to have a very deep, rich experience. Why is that important? Because human-to-human experience is not just one mode of communication. This conversation we're having involves visual and audio and presence and emotion. All of those things make human-to-human experience extremely effective. The telecommunication industry hasn't gotten there yet. Unified communication is a step in that direction. And then even at the lowest level, one of the things that we're probably best known for at Huawei, with about 2 billion people sitting on our cellular networks, is actually the next generation of wireless environment. And while we take it for granted to some extent as an industry that it will be there, there is huge amounts of innovation going on, and there is a huge transformation happening. We have no fewer than 4 different generations of cellular technology in the industry active at the same time right now. And there's a high probability that there will be at least a 5th coming, and maybe different topologies. Well, how do you solve for that problem? Do you build 5 networks? Well, one of the best innovations to come out of Huawei that really catapulted it to the front of the industry on cellular was this approach of saying you shouldn't have to build 5 networks. You should adopt new technology that allows flexibility in the architecture so that you can adapt to whatever network is appropriate or materializes or whatever spectrum is utilized in that environment over time. We call that single RAN. And the result is, through software-defined radios, flexible filters, tunable systems, we have developed systems that not only are flexible, but they're lower cost to operate, and most importantly, in the technical terminology, are implemented in a way that gives them a better signal-to-noise ratio, which translates into longer range, higher bandwidth, and less capital cost to deploy those systems. I think we have some customers here that will attest that we build pretty good wireless environments, and it shows up in real metrics, not just interesting marketing material. Much of that work is done in North America. Innovative people that have done this before that are solving new problems as we go forward. At the end of the day, if we want to play in the ICT world, if we want to be an ICT vendor, we must have disciplines beyond just a concentration in one area. And the beauty of Silicon Valley and our R&D center here is that we actually have the charter to attract everybody from energy and photovoltaic experts, to software experts, to handset experts, to people who understand the most advanced radio architectures or photonics, and put them together and start to look at these problems holistically. We act as that tip of the arrow for Huawei, and as we define these things and understand these problems, we get that inherent scale of being Huawei to be able to execute quickly and, quite frankly, outpace our competitors in this ICT transformation. The last thing I'll leave you with is just a bit of, maybe the boring part behind the scenes, but I think it's important. We have huge assets in North American R&D that I think are worth calling out. Not only are there interesting technologies that you saw, but the reason that they happen is because of the following four things. The first is people. My charter is to attract the best and brightest in the industry, to give them an environment in which they can actually innovate. And I think we've done that. We have more chief architects and CTOs and heads of engineering from other organizations that got frustrated in other environments. I will speak for myself. When I left Nortel after running R&D globally there after their fun, I retired. And I said, that's it, no more telecom for me. And then I started talking to Huawei and realized, well, this could be quite fun. Imagine an environment where you have an aggressive company that actually wants to invest in the future, understands it will be different, and actually wants to attract the best and brightest people to go and tackle it. It got me to get off the beach, and it got a lot of the people here to come join the company. By the way, I'll make my obligatory pitch. If you have wonderful friends that are great technologists that are looking for a new challenge, please have them talk to me. We'd love to hire them. The second is platforms. We are a test bed for Huawei to learn new ways to do development and to develop technology. Somebody asked me a question. I've had this question now 3 times in the last week. It's, doesn't it cost a lot of money to have people in Silicon Valley? Isn't Huawei's advantage lower cost? I'm like, well, no. Huawei's advantage is innovation. But yes, it does cost a lot of money to be in Silicon Valley. But Silicon Valley does 2 things. It brings brilliant minds together to build technology, but it also explores different ways to do things that make it more productive. The revenue per head of Silicon Valley companies is through the roof, not because some random event occurred, but because the companies think about using information technology, new processes, new approaches to building technology, and they find huge productivity gains. So my second charter is for us to learn from Silicon Valley, to figure out ways that Huawei can operate more efficiently, and then bring that back to the total company. The bottom line, with Huawei's headcount today, if it had the productivity of the best company in Silicon Valley, the revenue, based on a revenue per head comparison, should be about $80 billion, not 30. So we have a huge amount of opportunity to learn from this environment and improve our efficiency and actually improve the economics of the company, even if we have to spend more money in Silicon Valley to learn that lesson and find the people to do it. The third area is around patents. I take this very seriously. Intellectual property, compliance with the laws, participation in the ecosystem is critical. I'm reminded of this, how valuable patents are, because my former company, Nortel, just announced that they're trying to sell their patents, and a little company called Google offered them $900 million for them. That's interesting. I'm very glad to see that. I helped build a lot of that patent portfolio. Apparently it has value. But more importantly, from a global perspective, if you want to be a leader, you not only have to lead through execution, but you have to lead through innovation, and the best measure of innovation is patentable ideas. As we mentioned earlier, Huawei is the second most prolific inventor in all industries, period. That's an amazing statistic. If you roll back 5 years into the past, Huawei wasn't that focused on patents and, quite frankly, found it to be a disadvantage. This is an example of the company shifting to realize something is important, putting the resources behind it, and essentially closing a gap and then exceeding the expectations of the industry. And then the last piece is partnerships. One of the things about Silicon Valley that makes it really intriguing is that within 5 miles of where we are right now, I can pretty much find a world-leading company or a startup or a great idea or a university or somebody working on everything. And when you try to solve ICT problems, where you might suddenly be taking information technology, applying it to the energy sector to create a new entertainment experience, I'm not sure how those all fit together, but if you wanted to do it, guess what? There's one wonderful place where you would do it, and that's right here. So our third charter in North America is to cultivate our ecosystem, to make sure that we are open to cultivating new relationships, to working with startups, to working with our large suppliers, to having deep relationships early in the process, and to collaborate on our vision and their vision to make sure we can achieve this end state. The reason for that is, in the past, when you were in a couple $100 billion telecom industry, everybody was either you or your enemy because you were competing for a small pie, relatively small pie. The ICT industry is a $2.5 to $3 trillion industry. No one can address the entire industry. Partnerships are key, and so we're thrilled to have some of our partners here with us today. It's a great show of support. We keep looking for more. We have examples like Ebento, if you went through the tours, where it is a center point created by Huawei, surrounded by innovation coming from Silicon Valley startups, that the startups are thrilled to work with us because it gives them a platform to be able to access a huge global market, as Huawei being the vehicle for it. It also helps us get to market fast. It allows us to differentiate, and it's a totally different model on a global scale, but a very natural one in Silicon Valley. So the punchline behind all of this, and the thing I'd like you to take away after visiting us, is number one, the world is going to be very different in the future, but we think it's going to be better. Not just better for us as suppliers of stuff trying to collect revenue, but better for everyone as we start to break down these walls between enterprise, consumer, and carrier, and actually use all of the capabilities, all of the time, to solve the most interesting problems. That's exciting. Number two, the alignment that we're creating here is very much to do that mission. And it means that we have huge diversity and complexity in how we do it, but it's a necessary element because if Huawei wants to be the global ICT leader, which I think it absolutely can be, it has to embrace these ideas. Well, people can talk about embracing the ideas, and many companies do, but there are very few that have opened centers like this that went out and hired 1,000 of the best and brightest people in the industry with a very clear mission to go and capitalize on that opportunity. So again, thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you here. We're glad to have your support for our customers. We're glad to have your business, and we're glad to join you on this journey. So thank you very much.